On Christmas morning, I stood on the porch of the house I'd helped buy, clutching a gift for my grandson Noah in one hand and a tin of homemade cookies in the other, wearing that old sweater he once said made me look like a snowflake. When Sarah, my son's wife, opened the door in her bathrobe, she didn't crack a smile, just gave me a cold, hard stare. "You're not allowed here," she said, her words sharp, like she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. From inside, Noah's little voice piped up, "Is Grandma here?" Sarah slid sideways, blocking my view of him. I didn't plead or try to explain, I just gave a small, quiet smile. "Hope you managed the mortgage okay," I said softly, then turned and walked away. Those words shut the door on Christmas. But they sparked something much bigger. Before I dive in, hit that like and subscribe button if you're with me. And hey, drop a comment below. What's one life lesson everyone needs to hear before it's too late? Thanks for sharing. I parked across the street, my gut already whispering I wouldn't be staying long. The house hadn't changed, same fake pine wreath on the door, same half-deflated blow-up Santa sagging on the lawn. But I wasn't invited, not this time. I told myself it didn't sting, showing up as a mom with Christmas cookies and a gift for my grandson, wearing that scratchy snowflake sweater Noah loved last year, hoping it'd spark a smile. I pressed the doorbell, hearing muffled sounds inside, cartoons blaring from the TV. The door flew open, and there was Sarah, robe cinched tight like she was bracing for a brawl, her eyes already glossy. "You're not welcome here," she repeated, like it was a script she'd memorized. No hello, no Merry Christmas, not even a fake grin for Noah's sake. Just those words, cold as ice. I stood there, stunned for a heartbeat, just long enough to catch Noah's footsteps and his voice calling out, "Grandma?" I tried to peek past her, but she shifted to block me. "Michael's still sleeping," she added. "Rough night." My jaw clenched tight. "I just brought cookies and Noah's present," I said, holding up the tin and the wrapped box like a white flag, but her eyes didn't even flicker toward them. "Leave them on the step," she said, already pushing the door shut. I caught the door with my hand, not rough, just firm enough to stop it. "Sarah, I co-signed the loan for this place. Don't forget that." She rolled her eyes, scoffing. "Oh, you remind us every Easter, Christmas, and backyard barbecue. Think that gives you a free pass to barge into our lives forever?" I let the door go, keeping my voice steady, no need for a scene. "Good luck with that mortgage," I said, turning on my heel. I didn't hear the door click shut behind me. I was already heading back to my car, still gripping the cookies and gift. My hands trembled a bit, but not from sadness. Not anymore. Sarah had been freezing me out for years, slow and sly, like turning up the heat on a frog in a pot. And Michael? He used to stand up for himself, for me. I slid into my car, set Noah's gift on the passenger seat, and just sat there, staring at the house I'd helped them afford. A shadow moved behind the curtain, maybe Michael, maybe Noah. Didn't matter. They let her call the shots now. I turned the key, cranked the heater, and pulled away without a backward glance. In my head, I was already flipping through the mortgage papers, remembering that clause about co-owner rights if they mismanaged the finances. A tiny smile crept across my face. I didn't burn bridges, I built escape hatches. I didn't head straight home. I drove around for a bit, past empty lots and shuttered gas stations, through quiet neighborhoods where Christmas lights glowed softly behind curtains and families I'd never know were probably unwrapping gifts or bickering over dessert. Finally, I pulled into my apartment's parking lot, killed the engine, and sat there, staring at the cookie tin on the seat next to me. My place smelled like pine cleaner and the pot roast I'd warmed up the day before, still clinging to the hope they'd call and say, "Mom, come over." We changed our minds. No call came. I set the cookies on the counter, unwrapped Noah's gift, a NASA building kit he'd have gone wild for, and placed it next to my untouched dinner plate. I poured a small glass of boxed Merlot and stood in the kitchen doorway, chewing slowly, barely tasting a thing. The quiet in the apartment felt heavy, like it could press me into the floor. I flipped on the TV to drown it out, landing on some Christmas special I'd watched a million times, and muted it. My gaze drifted to the bookshelf, where a photo of Noah from last year sat slightly crooked, him in reindeer pajamas, frosting smeared on his cheeks, clinging to my legs like I was his whole universe. I picked up the frame, straightened it, then grabbed my phone. Noah's daycare had switched to some fancy app for photos and updates, but I'd been cut from the parent list. I found his old iPad contact, tapped call, and got voicemail. "Hey, sweetheart, it's Grandma," I said gently. "Just wanted to tell you I love you. Merry Christmas. Hope you're having a blast." I paused, then added, "Call me anytime, okay? I miss you so much." I hung up before my voice could waver, then set the phone face down. The wine stung a little as I sipped it. I walked to my small office corner, opened the drawer with all my house papers, and dug through folders until I found it, Michael and Sarah's mortgage packet. I hadn't touched it in years. There was my signature on the co-owner line, the notary's stamp, the fine print about needing both signatures for refinancing. I flipped through the pages slowly, carefully, until one sheet hit me like a punch, a refinance addendum from last spring. Something I'd never seen, never signed. But there was my name, forged, next to Sarah's, dated right after Easter. My stomach twisted. I stared at the signature, the loops were off, the angle wrong. I hadn't been near a pen that day. I grabbed my phone and texted Linda, my old friend who'd worked at a bank for 15 years and notarized all my big papers. "Can I swing by tomorrow?" I typed. "Need you to look at something. Mortgage related." Her reply came quick, too many words. I smiled. Always. I lingered there, clutching that forged document like it was a ticking bomb ready to go off. Today wasn't just about being brushed off or disrespected, it was about being betrayed, played for a fool. Somewhere inside that house, my sweet Noah was growing up under the care of someone who thought nothing of committing fraud, cutting out family, and doing it all with a smile. I grabbed the cookie tin, marched to the trash can, and tossed it in without a second thought. Sarah thought she could wipe me out of their lives completely. She should have been smarter about covering her tracks. I dumped the rest of my wine down the drain and pulled out a notepad. Tomorrow, I'd visit Linda, but tonight, I'd jot down every date, every payment, every lie they'd fed me. If Sarah wanted a fight, she'd just thrown the first punch, and I'd been silent for far too long. The next morning, I pulled up to Linda's cozy craftsman home just after 9 o'clock, my folder of papers tucked under my arm, hands still aching from gripping the steering wheel too hard the whole drive. Linda opened the door in her fuzzy slippers and a sweatshirt with a coffee stain, and before she even pulled me into a hug, she said, "You look like you've been through it." I didn't bother denying it. She ushered me into her kitchen, where the faint smell of burnt toast hung in the air, and I laid out the paperwork on her table like pieces of a puzzle I already knew how to solve but needed her to double-check. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the refinance page with the fake signature. "That's not my handwriting." She settled into a chair, slipped on her glasses, and studied it quietly. Then she reached into her own drawer, pulled out a mortgage document she'd notarized for me back in 2020, and set them side by side. "This isn't just not yours," she said deliberately. "It's a sloppy forgery, like some kid faking a hall pass. The slant's wrong, the pen pressure's off, and the date? A Saturday. No bank processes paperwork on a weekend." My stomach sank, even though I'd suspected Sarah's hand in this. Hearing it confirmed made it all too real. Linda leaned back, giving me a look that felt different, heavier. "Margaret, this isn't just family squabbling anymore. This is straight-up mortgage fraud, and it's illegal." I nodded, too stunned to say much. When Linda offered me coffee, I shook my head, and we sat in quiet for a moment while she copied the documents and handed the originals back. "You need a lawyer," she said firmly. "Right now, before they screw something else up and drag you down with them." I left her place feeling like I'd aged a decade in 10 minutes. Back home, I didn't even shrug off my coat. I just sat at my desk, searched online for legal aid in town, and made 2 quick calls until one office said they could see me the next morning. The rest of the day, I dug through every receipt, payment stub, and email I could find. Sarah had been clever, but not flawless. There were clues, like her emails saying, "Michael's handling the paperwork this time," or texts from Michael claiming, "Sarah says you don't need to show up at the bank." It all painted a picture, one of deceit wrapped in careful manipulation. I kept replaying the day I signed that original mortgage. Sarah barely mumbled a thank you. Michael hugged me a little too long, like he knew something I didn't. I'd told myself family always comes first, but now it was clear, they'd use me until I wasn't needed anymore, and then Sarah changed the game. That night, I scribbled a list on a yellow legal pad, titled "Stuff I Wish I Hadn't Done." At the top was trusting Sarah with anything more important than a potluck dish. I fell asleep on the couch in my sweats, my laptop open next to me, browser tabs still glowing with searches about co-signer rights and what happens when someone forges a mortgage. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was exhausted, sure, but beneath that, something fierce and focused was waking up. I wasn't just going to fix this mess, I was going to make sure Sarah remembered what it cost to shove me aside. By the time I walked into the legal aid office the next morning, I was drained from sifting through papers and mentally replaying every talk with Michael and Sarah over the last 3 years, trying to pinpoint when things went from family to something icy and distant. The lawyer, Sophia, was younger than I'd pictured, late 20s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense voice that cut straight to the point. I spread my folder across her desk, laid out the whole story, showed her the forged refinance document, and handed over Linda's comparison copies. She didn't flinch. "This is clear-cut mortgage fraud," she said, flipping through the pages fast. "You're a legal co-owner of that property. Any refinance without your signature is null and void. Depending on what they did with the funds, this could even involve theft." I nodded, gripping the chair's armrest, my heart pounding harder than I wanted to let on. Sophia walked me through my options. I could press criminal charges, block any future transactions, or file a civil motion to force the house's sale, which would trigger a full audit of every financial move tied to that mortgage. "You'd probably get your share back," she said. "But it'll get messy quick." I stared at the pile of papers between us. "It's already a mess." She told me to go home and sleep on it, but I knew my answer. I left her office, slid into my car, and called Michael before I even buckled up. He picked up on the third ring, voice groggy, like he'd just rolled out of bed. "Hey, Mom." I didn't bother with pleasantries. My voice was steady, firm. "We need to talk. Right now." He paused. "Sarah's not here." "Good. This isn't about her. It's about you." 10 minutes later, I pulled up outside the house I'd helped them buy. Michael shuffled out in sweatpants and a faded hoodie, rubbing his eyes like a kid caught skipping class. He climbed into the passenger seat, and for a moment, we just sat there in silence. "Did you know about the refinance?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. He didn't answer right away. "Michael," I pressed. He let out a long breath. "Sarah said we'd lose the house if we didn't do it. She said you wouldn't go along with it. So you let her fake my signature?" I didn't know until it was done. I thought, maybe it wouldn't be a big deal. I turned to look at Michael, keeping my voice calm but firm. "This matters, Michael. You let her wipe me out of an agreement I signed because I believed in you." "I'm sorry," he mumbled, his voice breaking a little, but it didn't sway me. "I wasn't here for apologies anymore. You need to make this right before I take it further," I said. "I've already talked to a lawyer, and if you think Sarah's lies stop here, you're mistaken." He nodded slowly, staring at his feet. "I'll talk to her," he said quietly. "No," I shot back. "You'll listen this time. When she starts scrambling, don't bail her out again." "Not now." He climbed out of the car without another word, shoulders slumped like a kid who'd been caught red-handed, and I watched him shuffle back into the house. That night, Sarah called, but I let it go straight to voicemail. Then a text popped up, "You don't want to start a fight you can't win." I stared at the message, my jaw tight, then opened a voice memo app, read her text aloud to record it, and saved it for proof. After that, I blocked her number. I wasn't playing games, and she knew it. The next morning, an envelope slipped under my door, no return address. Inside was a blurry copy of my driver's license and a typed note that said, "Watch what you stir up." I didn't blink. I just tucked it into my folder, stapled it next to the forged mortgage document, and scrawled "Evidence" across the top in red marker. Sarah had thrown down the gauntlet. What she didn't realize was that her little threat was now part of my arsenal. 2 days went by without a peep from Michael, no texts, no calls, no surprise visits. I'd love to say I used the time to catch my breath, but honestly, I barely closed my eyes at night. My mind kept circling back to Noah, wondering what stories Sarah was spinning for him, what version of me he was hearing, and whether he was starting to believe her lies. On the third morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Miss Collins, it's Emma from Noah's daycare. Something came up, and I thought you should know." I stared at the screen, racking my brain until I remembered Emma from church, before Sarah pulled them out of services. I called her back right away. Her voice was soft, cautious, but warm. "I probably shouldn't be reaching out," she said, "but I found something in Noah's cubby, and it felt like something you'd want to see." 15 minutes later, I pulled into the daycare parking lot. Emma slipped out the side door, clutching a folded piece of paper like it was a secret she wasn't supposed to share. "He drew this last week," she said. Didn't say much, but it seemed heavy. I thanked her, took the paper, and unfolded it in my car. It was a crayon sketch, simple but unmistakable, a house with 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small. Off to the side, behind a window, was another figure with a sad face, scribbled hard in blue crayon. Below it, in wobbly kindergarten handwriting, "Grandma is outside." My throat caught, and I ran my fingers over the drawing, my heart racing. Something inside me cracked, not just from anger, but from a deep, unexpected sorrow. Not only for myself, but for Noah, who was already learning what it felt like to be separated from someone he loved, caught in a grown-up mess he couldn't make sense of. I drove home, made a copy of the drawing, and scanned it into my phone. I opened my messages, pulled up Michael's contact, and sent the image without a single word, no explanation, no guilt trip, just the picture. I knew he'd see it, and I wanted him to feel its weight the way I had. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I let it ring twice before picking up. "I saw the drawing," Michael said, his voice low. "What did Noah say when he made it?" I asked. "He just told Emma he misses you. That's it." "And what did Sarah tell him?" A long pause. "Michael," I pressed. "She said you're too busy now. That you don't want to see him anymore." My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. "That's a flat-out lie, and you know it. He's going to grow up thinking you let her say that about me." "I'm sorry," he said again. "You keep saying sorry," I snapped, my voice sharp now. "But you're still letting her run the show. Your son is drawing pictures of being left out, and you're just standing by." He didn't answer. I softened just a touch. "Michael, I don't expect you to fix Sarah, but you've got to make a choice for Noah's sake. Do you want him growing up thinking love gets yanked away when it's not convenient?" There was silence, but this time it felt heavier, like regret or the slow unraveling of excuses. "I'll stop by," he said finally. "Tomorrow. Just me." I hung up without a goodbye, then taped Noah's drawing to my fridge like it was a battle flag, not just a kid's scribble, but proof, a reminder, and a warning all in one. Sarah might have barred me from their house, but I'd fight tooth and nail before I let her shut me out of Noah's heart. I wasn't going anywhere. And now, I had something even bigger to fight for. Michael showed up the next day, just past noon, wearing wrinkled jeans and a flannel that looked like it hadn't seen an iron in ages, carrying a bag of cheap store-bought muffins as if they could make up for 3 years of silence. I let him in without a word, pointed to the couch, and sat across from him, the folder of documents already waiting on the coffee table between us. He glanced at the folder but didn't dare touch it. I spoke to Sarah, he began, but I stopped him cold. We're done talking about her, I said. You can listen to me now, or you can walk out, but I'm not wasting my breath on someone who forged my signature and told my grandson I didn't have time for him. He nodded, eyes dropping to the floor, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of the boy I'd raised, not the man who'd let his wife turn him spineless. I met with a lawyer, I told him. She confirmed Sarah's refinance without my signature is fraud, which means every deal since then is on shaky legal ground, and I can force the house to be sold. He winced like I'd thrown a punch, but I pressed on. You and Sarah pulled thousands in equity from that refinance. I need to know where it went. She said it was for fixing up the bathroom, he mumbled. But we haven't even started. She's lying again, Michael, I cut in. And this time, I'm not the one paying the price. I flipped open the folder and slid the forged refinance page next to the original document Linda notarized a year and a half ago. Look at this signature. Check the date, Saturday, no notary. She didn't just stretch the truth, she faked a legal contract. He leaned forward, scrubbed his hands over his face, and shook his head slowly. I should have put a stop to it. You're damn right you should have, I said, my voice flat but sharp. So what's next? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I'm filing a motion next week, I said. It'll spark a financial audit, and if the judge agrees, and she will, the house goes up for sale. You'll get your cut, I'll get mine, and Sarah can deal with the fallout. He sat there, looking like a man who'd just been run over and was only now noticing the tracks. What about Noah? I'm not tossing him out, I said firmly. This is about her. If you want to stay in your son's life, figure out a way that doesn't involve letting his mom commit crimes and turn him against the people who care about him. He nodded, and for the first time, I felt like he actually meant it. I handed him a copy of Noah's drawing. He's watching, Michael. He sees more than you think. Michael didn't cry, but his jaw clenched like he was holding back a flood. He asked if he could call you, he said. Sarah told him no. She doesn't get to make that call anymore, I said. Get him a phone, one she can't touch. He nodded again, and I stood up. I'm not going anywhere, Michael, but I'm done playing nice. He left without a hug, and I didn't expect one. I wasn't looking for warm fuzzies anymore, just results. The next morning, I called Sophia and told her to go ahead with the motion. She filed it that afternoon, and the paperwork felt solid, official, like it carried weight. I stared at the stamped pages, feeling something shift inside me, not quite calm, but a sense of forward motion. Sarah thought she could erase me with her lies, but I was coming back with cold, hard truth. And the next time Noah drew a picture, I'd make sure I was right there with him, not stuck behind some window. It took just 2 days for the court notice to land in their mailbox. On the third night, Sarah showed up at my apartment without warning, banging on the door like she meant to knock it off its hinges, yelling about betrayal and family and how I had no clue what I'd just kicked off. I opened the door, and there she was in a hoodie and pajama pants, hair a mess, breath reeking of cheap wine, eyes red like she'd been crying or maybe just hadn't slept. You think you can pull this on me? She shouted, stepping closer until I held up my phone. Say one more word, Sarah, and I'm calling the police, I said evenly. And you know I mean it. She stopped dead in her tracks, not because she trusted me, but because she finally saw I wasn't the pushover she'd spent years ignoring, that I was now armed with documents, leverage, and nothing left to lose. You've wrecked everything, she hissed, her voice quieter but trembling. Michael's falling apart, Noah's confused, and you're out here acting like some saint. But all you ever wanted was to control us. I didn't budge. No, Sarah. I wanted respect. I put my name on that mortgage because I trusted my son when he said you needed help. All I ever asked for was a place in your lives, but you've spent years trying to shove me out of the home I helped you keep. We were fine until you started meddling, she snapped. You forged my signature, I said, calm as ever, raising my phone just enough to remind her I was recording. That's not setting boundaries, Sarah. That's a crime. Sarah let out a scoff, but I caught a flash of fear in her eyes. You're just bluffing, she said. No judge is going to rip a kid out of his home just because your name's missing from the original loan. I cut her off, voice steady. You're not as safe as you think, Sarah. The judge has already greenlit a financial audit, so you'd better get your story straight before they start asking under oath where all that equity cash disappeared to. Her mouth opened, snapped shut, then opened again, but no words came out. I took a step closer. You picked the wrong woman to mess with. I raised a son for 25 years, paid every bill, kept a house running. You really think I can't handle one entitled liar who drowns her problems in cheap wine? She stumbled back, her voice trembling now. You're going to regret this, she said, barely holding it together. Maybe, I replied, then shut the door slowly, turning the lock with a quiet click. I leaned against it, my heart pounding, but I wasn't afraid. I felt grounded, like I'd finally drawn a boundary that should have been set years ago. I texted Sophia right away, letting her know Sarah had shown up and that I'd recorded part of it, and she fired back within minutes. That's harassment. Keep that audio. It strengthens our case. I sent her the recording, then poured myself a small glass of water and stood in the kitchen, staring at Noah's drawing taped to the fridge. I traced my fingers over the crayon lines, picturing him asleep in that house, unaware of the storm about to shift his world. I wasn't out to steal his home. I was fighting to shield the innocence he still had left. Sarah started this mess when she chose deceit over honesty, control over compromise. Tonight, she unraveled because she finally saw her fragile web of lies wasn't just fraying, it was being dismantled, document by document. I'd keep pushing, piece by piece, until the truth stood tall. The next morning, I found a voicemail from Michael, left just after 1 a.m., his voice low and unsteady, like he was speaking from a parked car. I'm done, he said. I couldn't stay there anymore. She smashed a mug against the wall and told me to choose a side. I chose Noah. I'm at a motel off Route 5, and I don't know what's next. I played it twice before calling him back. He picked up on the first ring, sounding like he hadn't slept a wink. I asked if Noah was with him, and he said no. Sarah refused to let him take their son, and that was the breaking point, realizing she'd weaponized Noah the moment she lost her grip on everything else. I told him to come over, and an hour later, he showed up, looking drained, with dark circles under his eyes, clutching a plastic bag of clothes in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. When I offered him a seat, he stayed standing, like he didn't feel worthy of settling in. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Something I should have admitted a long time ago. I stayed quiet, letting him spill. He confessed he knew about the forged signature before it happened. Sarah had pitched it as a quick fix, and when he pushed back, she threatened to take Noah and vanish to her sister's place in Colorado. In that moment, he panicked, terrified that losing her meant losing his son, so he let her go through with it. I didn't sign anything, he said, but I didn't stop her either. I was weak, scared, and I thought if no one found out, it wouldn't matter. I asked what changed his mind, and he glanced at Noah's drawing on the fridge, saying Noah made another one at the motel, a stick figure with a suitcase, labeled Daddy Leaving the Madhouse. I didn't cry or raise my voice. I just stepped over, took the envelope from his hand, and opened it to find his written statement, every detail of Sarah's refinance scheme, where the money went, receipts showing a new credit card, a hidden PayPal account, and transfers to her sister. He documented it all. You're going to testify? I asked. He nodded. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Even if it risks custody? He paused, then said, if doing the right thing costs me Noah, I'll have to live with that. But I'm hoping the court sees the difference between a one-time mistake and a pattern of lies. I brewed coffee while he sat quietly at the table, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was just his mom. We were two adults, battered but determined, trying to clean up a mess we didn't fully create. But one of us had finally stopped enabling it. He left a few hours later, heading back to the motel until the next court date, and I promised I'd be there every step of the way. That night, I mailed Noah a simple astronaut book, writing inside the cover, no matter how far you fly, I'll always be looking up at the stars with you. Love, Grandma. I tucked in a small phone with my number pre-programmed, along with instructions simple enough for a 6-year-old to follow, a quiet act of defiance, a lifeline Sarah couldn't sever. I fell asleep with the lights on, not out of fear, but because I knew Sarah had been hiding her secrets in the shadows. Now, we were shining enough light to burn them away. 3 weeks later, the house went up for sale, listed with cheery words like cozy and charming, masking the legal chaos behind it, held together by forced agreements and a signed affidavit. Sarah didn't show up to the court hearing. Her lawyer cited stress and emotional strain, saying she'd gone to her sister's in Colorado for now, but the judge didn't bat an eye. Sophia laid out the forged document, Michael's confession, and the financial audit revealing Sarah had siphoned over $28,000 of equity into her personal accounts, and the judge didn't hesitate to approve the forced sale. Michael and I stood outside the courthouse afterward, no cheers or high fives, just a quiet moment of mutual understanding. "You holding up okay?" I asked. He gave a half shrug. "Not really, but I'll get there." The house found a buyer quicker than I'd imagined. Turns out, the market was hungry for anything under $180,000. After all the fees, penalties, and deductions, Michael walked away with 25%, while I got 45% to reflect my original co-signer's stake, giving me a chunk of money that, for once, wasn't tied to someone else's needs or regrets. I used it to buy a little fixer-upper near a school, a single-story place, pale blue with peeling paint and a yard choked with weeds. But it felt like mine in a way nothing had since my husband passed away. That first Saturday, when Michael showed up with Noah and a paint roller, I didn't pry. We didn't mention Sarah or what lay ahead. We just slapped paint on the walls, the trim, even the mailbox, which Noah insisted had to be green because it's the happiest color. I whipped up sandwiches. Michael patched the rickety gate. For the first time in months, life felt simple, like we weren't lugging our heartache around anymore. Noah stayed the whole weekend, sleeping under a fort of bedsheets in the guest room, and on Sunday morning, he handed me a new drawing, me and him on a swing set, Michael in the background with a paintbrush. "This is our new house," he said proudly. I taped it to the fridge, right beside his first drawing. "It's perfect," I told him. After Noah went to bed, Michael sat on the couch, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "I'm not sure what kind of father I've been," he said quietly. "But I'm going to do better." I didn't let him off easy or say he was forgiven. I just nodded and said, "Kids trust what they see you do over and over. Start there." He nodded like I'd handed him a lifeline more useful than any therapy session. A week later, the house sale finalized. The wire transfer hit my account in the morning, I signed the last papers by afternoon, and that night, I sipped iced tea on my new porch, watching Noah kick a ball across the small lawn. The bitterness was gone. Sarah was out of the picture, maybe forever, maybe not. That wasn't my burden anymore. I'd stopped trying to patch up other people's messes just to keep a peace that never included me. I had a home, a grandson who giggled again, and a son who was starting to learn that love means showing up when it counts. 18 months later, to the day, I was setting the table for 3, not for show or tradition, but because I'd learned peace comes from following through, not grand gestures. As I placed the last plate, I heard the familiar knock, then the quick scuffle of sneakers and Noah's excited shout, "Grandma, we brought cranberry sauce." I swung open the door to see Noah clutching a plastic container with red streaks smeared on the lid, Michael trailing behind with a tiny fake Christmas tree they'd grabbed from a gas station because Noah said, "Every Christmas needs a tree, even a little one." I laughed, stepped aside, and let them in. The house smelled of roasted chicken, now freshly painted with fixed siding and a small wooden swing out back that Noah called his thinking spot. We ate at the table where I'd taped his drawings like cherished keepsakes, one from last year, one from the motel, and now a new one he handed me before dessert, a crayon sketch of the 3 of us in front of my little blue house, with "Our Real Christmas" written above in green marker. I hugged him tighter than I meant to, kissed the top of his head, and said, "You make every place feel like home, kid." After dinner, Michael washed the dishes without me asking. While he scrubbed, Noah plopped next to me on the couch, showing off photos on his kid-friendly phone, mostly blurry shots of Legos, squirrels, and what might have been a pizza slice with googly eyes. But one caught my breath, me on the porch, sipping iced tea, eyes closed in the sunlight. "I snuck that one when you weren't looking," he said, grinning. "It's my favorite." I stared at the screen, my chest swelling with something so big it almost ached. "Mine too," I whispered. Later, after Noah dozed off watching a cartoon on the carpet and Michael carried him to the guest room, we sat on the porch, and he pulled out his phone. "Sarah left a voicemail," he said. "She wants to talk." I nodded slowly. "You going to call her back?" He paused. Part of me wants to let her have it. The other part just wants to keep moving forward. I didn't offer advice. I just said, do what keeps Noah safe and you steady. That's what matters now. He tucked the phone away and leaned back in the chair. "Thanks, Mom, for not giving up on me." I glanced at the little plastic tree twinkling faintly through the window, then at my grown son, who'd finally figured out how to put his boy first, and I said, "Just keep being there, Michael. That's all I ever asked for." And that was it. Nothing loud or theatrical, just a quiet kind of closure, the kind that sinks deep into your soul and whispers you've made it through something that could have shattered you. Now, you get to build something stronger. This Christmas wasn't about fancy lights, big gatherings, or flawless plans. It was about honesty, hard work, and the people who stuck around after the chaos. I'd walked away from a house I'd helped pay for, and in its place, I gained a home no one could ever take away. As I tucked Noah into bed that night, pulling the blanket up over his shoulder and pressing a soft kiss to his forehead, I realized this wasn't just a happier ending. It was the start of something new.